Welcome to the Feisworld podcast, engaging conversations that cross the boundaries between business, art, and the digital world.
The only proof of our dedication to a job is the outputs of what we do. Be confident, don't get arrogant, and remember that you can make any mistake on earth, no matter how successful you've been. People that don't have humility, I don't think are capable of being collaborative, because you're not willing to accept that great ideas come from anywhere. You can say that. You can say it out loud like you mean it, but you're not really listening if you don't really think that you can have that kind of humility. I may be very technical, and I may love innovation, and I love product development, and I really, really geek out on that stuff. I genuinely enjoy creating things. My superpower, or whatever you want to call it, and I think everyone has a superpower for the record. So, my superpower, I believe, is I'm a sales and marketing CEO. Where I add the most value is when something starts to take off, I'm good at being the gasoline on the fire and taking it from this into this. Raising money is a soulless and horrible process that I do not enjoy at all. And that was probably definitely the worst part of the job. It's kind of like going through a mortgage every day. And if you are a creative person or a product person or a tech person, you feel like you're doing that all the time, and it's not fun. I think if you can figure out a way to slow it down a little bit, you can save yourself a lot of heartache.
Hello, Feisworld podcast listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Stories from Sung and Unsung Heroes. There are lots of exciting news for us in 2017. In addition to our main hosting service, which is Libsyn, Feisworld is also available on iTunes, of course, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Player FM, Google Play, and most recently, YouTube. We are prioritizing top 10 episodes first, with new episodes rolling in one by one. My producer has done a phenomenal job just turning audio into video and making sound more interactive and engaging. So what does that mean? Hop over to youtube.com/Feisworld to see for yourself. Today, I am joined by Freddie Laker, who is a British-American entrepreneur and the founder of the tech startup Guide, and most recently, Chameleon Collective and Code Orange. Prior to these companies, he launched the internet service provider Laker.net and the digital agency iChameleon Group, and worked at SapientNitro, now known as SapientRazorfish, where we met in 2009, and he was with the company as a vice president of global marketing strategy. He is the son of Sir Freddie Laker, the founder of British airline Laker Airways. So what will you learn from this episode? Hearing firsthand from a serial entrepreneur who's daring and trying new things, especially related to computers and new forms of technologies, since he was just a teenager. Sounds like every kid these days, but it was rather unusual 20 years ago. The nostalgic part of the story for me was to look back to when I first had my computer in '94, though I didn't really do much with it other than using the Paint program. And meanwhile, Freddie not only started building computers on his own, he also decided to drop out of college and became a DJ for a Miami-based private radio station called WOOM. After being shut down by the Federal Communications Commission, also known as the FCC, their radio station used the internet to transfer the signal between two antennas, making it the world's first 24-hour internet radio station. There is no way not to delve into Freddie's origin story as the son of a very successful entrepreneur. Following the launch of SkyTrain in 1977, his father, Sir Freddie Laker, was knighted the following year in recognition of his services to the airline industry. In fact, Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Group, once said in a story he posted, having received help from a business mentor during his struggle to get Virgin Atlantic off the ground, Richard Branson knows all about the importance of having someone to look up to. That very person was Sir Freddie Laker. What did Freddie learn from his father? What was the important lesson Freddie learned the hard way, but thankful for his father later on? What was the one conversation like between the two while Freddie Jr. was struggling in his personal and professional life? This conversation was a lot of things, from business to family and the moments and places in between. If you enjoy this episode, please share with others. Better yet, leave a comment and let us know your thoughts on our blog or via social media. I want to thank Freddie Laker for his time, honesty, and sharing his stories above and beyond what I had expected. This episode is dedicated to Sir Freddie Laker and his family. He changed the world by enabling ordinary people to fly, and the public loved him and will always remember him for it.
So there are a lot of reasons why I want to chat with you because of your legacy and because how we met at Sapient in 2009 and literally over a couple of meetings. But one of the things I always remember is people said that Freddie's such a nice guy. He's very kind, and then since then there are a lot of things I need to catch up on, including Guide, which I know that literally won a number of major awards and something you're very passionate about for a long time. And most recently, you started Chameleon Collective in August 2015 and Code Orange in March 2016. So there's a lot of stuff I want to cover on this podcast. But I would love to learn something firsthand too, is a little bit about your origin stories. So it's like how you grew up, where you grew up, and you have an American accent.
Sure. Well, my weird, I call it mid-Atlantic. It's got a little twinge of the English sound after it, but it's this kind of weird, bizarre twang, but with a little bit of both in there. So, sure, I'll give you a little bit of my background. So my father is English. My mother is actually from Oklahoma. So I'm half Hick and half Brit. My parents were married 8 times between them, 4 times each. So I have this very diverse and unique family. I have a 78-year-old sister who's the same age as my mother, as part of my father's first marriage. I have a half brother from my mom's first marriage who was actually world recognized Hall of Fame wrestler. And I have a half brother called Biff. You cannot make this kind of stuff up. It's too crazy. And then you've got me, who's this one kind of connection between the two different sides of my family. I grew up in between basically Miami and England. So I had a house in England until I was about 19. But when my parents got divorced, we moved to Miami. No other reason than, frankly, it was one of the places that Laker Airways flew to, and I think my mom had started going there, in the early '80s, and really liked it, and just chose that to be the place to move to. Since then, although I've kind of went to early school here, and actually mainly in Miami, and then 1992 Hurricane Andrew wiped out Miami, and I moved out to Palm Beach and did high school up there. I spent a couple months a year in England, so mainly most Christmas breaks and most of all the summer, and I think that kind of kept that little bit of that English heritage alive for me, and always made me want to kind of go back to England one day, which I did do for the record at one point for a couple of years, and then realized the weather was rotten, and there was a reason why my family wanted to live in Miami. That was a little bit of my childhood. I went to school in Palm Beach Gardens, a place called the Benjamin School. I think my claim to fame there was I had the second lowest GPA only to my best friend who had the worst GPA. But I had I think I had the third highest SAT scores in the school. I used to drive my teachers nuts. I mean, they knew I was smart, but they also knew that I just chose not to apply myself. Getting all personal and deep with you, but it's funny. I was always a pretty nerdy kid when I was growing up, and when I went to high school, I kind of chose to reinvent myself as a I didn't want to be the nerdy kid, and I ended up being becoming the class clown, and actually ended up going from being a kid who couldn't catch a ball in middle school and elementary school to, by the time I graduated high school, I was a captain of the soccer team and played on the American football team and a bunch of other things like that. But the reality was, I think I was always that nerdy kid. I was I would kind of go to school all day and goof around and crack jokes and play sports, but then I would go home and I would stay up on my computer till 3. I've always been a nocturnal person till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then go to high school the next day. And I don't think anyone really understood that I was doing that, mainly because I just probably didn't want them to know. And so I was always say I was kind of a closet nerd my high school years. Got very early adopter of new tech. When I could hand build a computer from the age of probably 8 or 9, which is not even that unusual now, but was very, very unusual if you start thinking about that being 1986 or so. And I think it was really those skills then that really kind of set the tone for my whole life, and a lifelong obsession with technology. I mean, I think I got on the internet the first time in 93, 94. Mm-hmm. And just because I just wanted to play with it.
I remember those days. There are a lot of stories, and I am so surprised. I always over-prepare and realize my guests always give me many more stories that I can possibly think of. Wow. So, where do I begin? I want to first ask about the computer stories, as in you went on the internet and you were, 96, you were a teenager perhaps at the time. What excited you the most about computers? What were you looking for at the time, which was such a fraction of what we are exposed to today?
I just wanted to be on something new, and I just thought I think the concept of it was so cool. What I love this, you're kind of like maybe how I didn't like school, in the sense of I wanted to learn what I wanted to learn as opposed to what they wanted to feed me at that time. And I think this concept that I could find what I wanted to find out there was very interesting to me. I can tell you the big break for me, though, and I think it's one of my favorite stories. And I think I always kind of use it as an example of how I got into the industry. I went to university for a couple months, and I dropped out. Wasn't my thing. And I came back to the U.S. and told, basically my father sat me down and said, son, I'm going to do something to you today. He goes, you're gonna hate me for it. He goes, but one day you're gonna thank me. And he was right. I did hate him for this, and I did thank him a couple years later. He completely cut me off. Not emotionally or as a father or anything like that, just financially. I had a very it was a very lucky childhood because of some of the successes of my father, and completely cut me off. And he said, well, I don't think that's totally fair. He said, I will give you a job working at Laker Airways as a records clerk. And he's like, I'll pay you $18,000 a year, and you basically have the lowest ranking job in the entire business. And it was his, I think, attempt to teach me some humility. And you have to move out of the house, and you've got to kind of go, look after yourself now and understand how money works. And so again, I'm sure plenty of people were cut off and didn't even get a job. So, but it was, for me, it was a pretty big reality check. So I was, working at the airline, and for the record, by the way, within 6 or 7 months, I already self-appointed myself the network administrator for the airline, and basically was, self-running our IT. That's another story. But anyway, so while all this is happening, my other great love has always been music. And at that period of my life, I was really, really, really into house music. I'd learned about house music in about 1992. I remember exactly where I was the first time I heard it. And I was an aspiring DJ. I was a pretty terrible DJ when I was 18, but I was still an aspiring DJ. And but I had a pretty good mouth on me. Thank God I haven't lost that along with my hair. And I was able to BS my way basically into DJing on a totally illegal pirate radio station called The Womb. And The Womb was, holed up on Washington Avenue in Miami Beach with an antenna hidden up in the top of a bell tower in basically a shopping plaza. And we had this little room kind of, hidden up above all these stores. And I had a crap slot on a 2 p.m. I think it was on a Tuesday. And but I was on the radio, and being 18 years old, that was pretty much the coolest thing that had ever happened to me. And one day when I was in the station, the Federal Communication Commission raids the place and just happened to be while I'm there, and on this totally illegal station. So everything starts getting taken away from us. I realize it's the end of the station. Frankly, I'm thinking I'm going to get arrested. When I realize I'm not going to get arrested, I start getting a little bit more confident, and I want to try and help my friends out. And I ended up talking to the FCC folks that are there, saying, "Look, please don't take our transmitters away from us. You're never going to hear from us again. We're just a bunch of students. We don't have any money. Please, please, please." This will, you never see this stuff again. And I think we were being very sincere at the time. So, being the key words. So we end up being able to keep the transmitter. We're off there, shut down. And actually, I don't even think we realized how big the station was until we got shut down, because it was the front page of the Miami Herald and the front page of the Sun Sentinel and the third page of Sun Sentinel, whatever it was, that we were off there. And basically, a couple weeks go by, and I'm pretty bummed about the station being gone. And this idea hits me like a lightning bolt. And I have very few perfect memories in my life, but this is one of them. So I remember I was in my car when the idea started to come together in my head, and I remember I was driving off onto I-95 in Miami, and I actually pulled the car over on the side of the road because I had a notepad next to me and started kind of writing down some thoughts. Basically, Real Player, do you remember Real Player? Mm-hmm. So it had just come out. Not to date ourselves here, and cable modems had just hit Miami Beach for the first time. I don't even think they were a full meg in speed back then. I think it was 512K or something, and maybe not even that. And so basically we got a Real Player's server set up where the station was, put an internet connection there, and started broadcasting on the internet. Then we got a hold of another transmitter. We put that hooked up to a computer at the south end of South Beach, and then we took the original one, put that hooked up to another friend's computer at an apartment building in the north end of South Beach, and we made this very simple computer program that randomized the signals. So we would send the radio signal to one antenna through the internet for 2 or 3 minutes, and then at 5 minutes later it'd go to this antenna, and then 1 minute to that antenna, and then 11 minutes to this antenna. And we were using the internet basically to move the signal around, so that basically the FCC couldn't zoom in and find where we were broadcasting from anymore.
Wow, wait, is this related to Womb, or is this some...
It's the Womb, yeah, this is still the Womb. So basically we've got Womb back on the air, and I think it's really ironic. All we cared about was the FM station, but the concept of the internet side of it was nothing to us, but we saw the internet as a way effectively of beating the government from finding us.
What was illegal about it, by the way?
Well, you can't just randomly pick an FM station and just start broadcasting on it.
Oh, I wasn't sure about that. So you have to register.
We just picked a channel that no one was broadcasting on. We're like, yeah, screw it. What was it? 88.5, I think it was, and 55. We basically we just picked a FM channel and grabbed it, which you just can't do. And so. So by doing what we had done with this, when they tried to come find us again, basically, I mean, they were thinking like the movie Pump Up the Jam or something. I mean, they thought we had the antenna in the back of a truck and we're driving the antenna around, or they thought maybe we had it in the back of a boat and that we were moving the antenna around that way. And so I had this vision of these guys, I mean, we were, probably back on the air an hour before the phone rang. They came down to the station. We said, yeah, come on down. We said, look, we're just broadcasting on the internet. We don't really know what happens with it once it leaves here. And they, these guys just weren't prepared for this. No one had ever done anything like this to them before. And so I have this vision of them in a truck with these things called triangulation units, and it's how they would zoom in on you. They would basically, they could say, look, we're 3 miles away from the signal, we're a mile away from the signal, we're half a mile away from the signal. And then the vision of them like in a van or something, this is pure speculation, just kind of driving up and down South Beach going, we're 3 miles away, we're a mile away, we're a half mile away, we're 6 miles away. What the hell just happened? Up and down South Beach. Well, it took them about 5 months to figure out that if they stopped the car, they could wait and they could keep inching closer and closer to us. And they ended up shutting us down again. And at this point, we were not keen to mess with them. And it's a wonder none of us, frankly, ended up with some severe fine. Now, the fun part of this story, connecting it back to the internet, is we had been shut down. And when we shut down, we decided to keep broadcasting on the internet. And frankly, it never even really dawned on us that anyone would listen to the internet when we were doing this. But when we got shut down, we had like 100 or 200 people a day listening through the internet. We're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Well, maybe we should keep that going. Real Player ended up giving us a preset in the software. In 1999, they were selling those for $1 million a pop. But back then, there were so few internet radio stations. I don't know if you remember this, but in Real Player, you could click up on the top, and they just had a stations drop down, and then they had there was maybe 30 stations they'd popped in there, under a couple of different categories, and they were like, you were the only stations in the world. And basically, we got shut down. We started seeing the numbers blow up, especially once that happened. The numbers are skyrocketing now. And one day, we're getting interviewed by different newspapers about the pirate. One day, Rolling Stone magazine reaches out. And I wasn't there this day, but this is how the story was repeated back to me. It was basically, the phone rings, Rolling Stone wants to talk to us, and they're talking to my friend and says, hey, we want to interview you guys. And my friend's like, about the pirate radio station. And they're like, what pirate station? The pirate radio station. They're like, no, we were interested. You guys were one of the first internet radio stations, full-time, 24-hour-a-day internet radio stations in the world, and we just kind of wanted to know why you did that. And it was literally like, hand over the phone, hey, apparently we were one of the first internet radio stations in the world. We had no idea. Wow. And they wrote this article about us. There's 4 of us. There's 2 kind of techie guys, of which it was my friend Duncan and I, were the really guys doing all the technical side, and then the other guys. And that article came out, and within a month, all of a sudden my phone was ringing a lot. I was only about 19 years old.
What year was this, 97 or so?
It's around 97, yeah. And, my phone started ringing a lot. And I didn't really know, I was a kid, back then, like now, if you want to do something, you have a great idea, and you're some big shot in New York or whatever, and someone goes, oh, I need a great internet guy. Everyone's got a dozen people they can put out there, or for the most part, if you're in the industry. Back then it was like, I want to do this. Do you know anyone? Everyone would say no, but you'd be like, I read about a guy the other day, and people were just hunting me down. And I truly credit the womb for my entire career. I mean, I had no college education. I was incredibly passionate about what I did. I would argue that the reason I'm able to speak semi-well and can write very professionally and other things like that, I like to believe I'm decent at, beyond a lot of personal experience at this point. So I would say my father was my business college, and I learned an incredible amount about from him for how to conduct yourself in business. But my technical experience and my internet experience really all goes back to the womb. And if it wasn't for effectively my love of house music, for making me want to get involved with the pirate radio station, which in turn inspired me to, bring this thing on the internet. I mean, none of this stuff would have happened for me.
What was what was some of the content that you produced or played while you're working at Womb? Like, what is the, because 24/7 is
it was all electronic music. So I mean, back then it was, it's not, electronic music's I think quite mainstream now, but back then we were, people would be playing drum and bass for 2 hours. I used to play it. I think in that year I was still playing a lot of trance music, and I think badly, might I add. I mean, I could barely mix two records together back then. In fact, I think I'd be lucky if I could get through a set without completely demolishing it. But and then some people playing funky house. So there's just so many diversified styles of it, and we always had some people that wanted to play. And South Beach had a very vibrant nightclub scene, and everyone was happy to get a couple hours on the Womb.
Wow. It's so funny. I only read about Womb on your Wikipedia, and it was barely a sentence, and I'm so glad you're able to elaborate. Yeah. Being one of the first and, ran by a bunch of kids, this is like the story.
Funny, there's been a lot of kind of early adopter kind of trend in my career, for the record, for better or worse. I would actually argue that I was so early on a lot of things that it didn't work out in my favor. I was too early on the internet radio, I think, to really do something great with it. I think in the late 90s I could have raised money on a paper napkin, and probably, if I'd known what I'd known now, I would have raised $30 million for the Womb. I think we still would have failed, because I think the model wasn't there yet, but it would have been easy to have kind of had some big wins like that early. After that, I went on to start one of the earliest internet service providers in Florida, and ran that from I guess whatever till the early 2000s. I mean, we were one of the first people in South Florida to have 56K internet access, which seems really quaint and cute right now, but I thought was really, really cool back then. And I still think, it was a good time for it, and again, that was a good business. But I still also think it may have been a bit early on that. I think with iChameleon, which was the digital agency we had in the mid 2000s, I think we finally got the timing right on that, and that was the one that was ended up being brought into Sapient in 2008. But I think the timing was good on that one. And then I had another company called Guide, you mentioned earlier. Guide was a reminder, was a technology for effectively transforming text-based online news into video. It originally actually started off as the original idea before I pivoted, as many startups do, was effectively a newsreader for smart TVs. I wanted to be able to take the stuff I like to read, on this, and make it something that I could consume, non-traditional news through the TV. I was definitely too early on that one.
How did you go about that? Who did you have on your team? What was your role versus their role? I think it's interesting because you are not a one trick pony. You wear many hats. So tell me about that sort of setup process.
That is true. And just a quick little additional backstory. So I was convinced that this was going to happen because I thought the Apple TV was going to come out, an Apple TV that ran apps like the current one does. I misjudged that by about 2 years. So there's I was convinced it was coming out any day. In fact, I tried to time the whole startup around an unreleased product. With some advice to any entrepreneurs watching: don't do that, especially not with Apple when it's really hard to predict it. So I learned a lot of things with Guide. Guide was the first company that, where I've had some companies that went through challenging periods and so on, but I really see Guide as the first company I ever had that really failed. And I learned a lot of things about it. One was the one thing I just mentioned to you a moment ago. Another was about finding your right role as a founder. I may be, very technical, and I may love innovation, and I love, the product development, and I really, really geek out on that stuff. I genuinely enjoy creating things. That being said, my superpower, or whatever you want to call it, and I think everyone has a superpower for the record. So, my superpower, I believe, is I'm a sales and marketing CEO. Where I really going to excel is I like being part of the creative process, but I should have other people do that. And where I add the most value is when something starts to take off. I'm good at being the gasoline on the fire and taking it from this into this. I think I got that wrong with Guide. I was there on the very early stage, really building out this product from day one. I think that because it's in my very nature to want to kind of sell and market things, I was marketing it and trying to grow it from month 3. And actually, in hindsight, what I should have done is kept my role at Sapient for another year, or maybe kept up a kind of more traditional job, built an MVP of that product much cheaper than I did, in the background, very quietly in stealth mode, kind of helped flesh it out, work out some of the kinks that I was inevitably going to ran into in a much more expensive fashion, where I'd already quit my job and had hired a whole bunch of people. And I should have slowed it down. And I think if I'd slowed it down and had done that, focused on my strengths and let other people focus on their strengths, I think would have been probably successful with that one. But it's hard to do that, especially if you, like you said, you're someone who wears many hats. There's a big difference between being able to do a lot of things and should I be doing a lot of these things.
So it's interesting you mentioned Sapient. I wonder what would be the value there. It sounds like that you invested a lot of your own money and time, certainly, into Guide. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So actually, on a funny note, and even Sapient invested in Guide. So I thought that was pretty cool. That apparently I'm the only person at Sapient who's ever quit Sapient and then had them invest in their next business.
Wow.
My kind of running joke on that has always been, they either really appreciated the work I did for them, or they wanted to make sure that I never ever came back.
Please succeed.
That was very kind of them, and I'll forever be indebted and thankful, to Sapient for that. But I did have a lot of my own money in it. I think. Also Guide was the only company I'd ever raised money for. And I think raising money, and this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs always talk to me about. They talk to me about, oh great, I've seen you raise money. How can you help me raise money? I'd love to, if I had 250 grand or 500 grand or $1 million or $2 million, whatever it is, to start this business, I know it'd be a great success. I would argue that actually having all that money created a false sense of security for me. I think it made me not do things as lean and as mean as I had done them in the past, where I had basically bootstrapped, the prior businesses, and even at my new companies, I bootstrapped. The other thing is, aside from dealing with a couple very friendly parties like Sapient and some, investor friends of mine I've known for a long time, raising money is a soulless and horrible process that I do not enjoy at all. And that was probably definitely the worst part of the job. And I think at some point it felt like it was more than 50% of the job. It's kind of like going for a mortgage every day.
Yeah.
It's just not fun. And if you are a creative person, or a product person or a tech person, you feel like you're doing that all the time, and it's not fun. I think if you can figure out a way to slow it down a little bit and be scrappy, and at least the earliest stages, and just validate your idea, you can save yourself a lot of heartache. And if you're a person like me who gets very emotionally invested in almost everything he does, probably save yourself a couple of dollars too. Because I think I would have rationally cut myself off a little bit, cut myself off from putting so much of my own money in a little earlier than I would have in hindsight. But what they say with hindsight, it's always 20/20.
Yeah, that part is always very difficult, challenging. I notice I happen to be have very similar interest, even though I didn't necessarily start a company of my own until very recently, and basically just me working as a freelancer. Over the years, past 10 years, I've witnessed so many of my friends, many of my best friends, of course. I like to surround myself, with entrepreneurs to kind of watch all the ups and downs, and there is no set formula. and every product is so different, and there's the personality, the CEO, and then everybody else on the team. It's really quite challenging because as a producer right now, pretty much nearly, I would say almost 100% of things I do focus on MVP for my listeners who are not as familiar as minimal viable product. And, when do you know it's the right time for phase 1 and 2 or V1, V2? Is it about paying customers? If so, how many of them? How do people think about, how do you think about those things now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Paying customers is one thing, but I would argue that paying customers is a reaction to the outcome that you're trying to get to. So again, I learned so much from the guide experience. I feel like I probably learned more from that than almost any company I've ever done before. And I guess it's the ones you get your ass kicked on that you learn the most from. But I would say that it's when you feel that you're actually, without BSing yourself, solving a true, real, meaningful problem is when you're probably ready, and it solves it well. With Guide, the earlier stages of it, it was very cool. I mean, it was a very, very cool piece of technology. And then I used to joke we'd get a lot of high fives, but not a lot of checks, because it was like, man, this is awesome. I don't see myself using it, but it is awesome, And it's like, and so that's a problem. And I think you can have things that are not that awesome, but man, they solve something that's huge. I think when you really solve something, the money starts coming in very quickly. Everyone's willing to pay to have a legitimately meaningful pain point taken away from them. It sounds obvious I think maybe some people say that, but I don't know. Sometimes, especially if you're, an early adopter personality type like I am, you can see something and be like, again, that's awesome. And I think this is the future. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a viable business yet. And that's why when you see, that kind of classic chart of, technology adoption where there's this kind of, the hype phase and it goes up there, and then they talk about the phase of disillusionment where it's like everyone hypes it to death and everyone's like, well, I don't really know what's going to happen with it yet. And then there's this period of like, well, once all the hype goes away, people start finding meaningful reasons to use it again, and things start coming back up into the real period of adoption. We're probably going to go through that with VR over the next couple of years. I think we'll kind of course correct and a couple other technologies, and I certainly went that personally through my own business.
Oh, that's interesting. I recently interviewed a very young woman. I think she's 26, and Kim on the show, and it was brilliant. I saw her as this young girl, but the way she described her own business, she runs a social media sort of online courses type of business, and she said precisely one pain point, and make it very clear. Sometimes I think we try to solve too many pain points, as in,
totally true.
We're your one-stop shop, and it sounds so trivial, but one of the things that she revealed all the stats to me. I couldn't believe it. It was great. So one of the most downloaded paid for product that she has is one of the smaller ones called a content calendar, which I happen to be specializing in. She's like, people really look out for just that, and they're glad to have it. And people when she first put it out as a free product, as sort of the lead magnet, people were asking her, how could you even make it free? People should pay for it. And I think those are really interesting.
Great teachers. These niches that people find for themselves, the more focused, the better. Especially in a world that's increasingly cluttered. How do you have a message if you've got too much to say? It's so people, it's so hard to be memorable. And if you give people five things to remember you for, they're probably going to remember one anyway. So give them a couple clear, easy things to connect back to you.
Absolutely. So with all the chaos, and I definitely want to get to your current companies as well, but since you brought up the attention span from everybody else, including ourselves, and so I wonder, what are some of the news resources, and how do you keep yourself up to date? I feel I still do feel kind of exhausted living the technical world that we are today.
That's a tricky one. I think it's tricky and not tricky. So the easy part is to say, well, hey, I read all these sites. I use tools like Feedly to kind of aggregate all the different subjects I find interesting into kind of groups and clusters that I can read up on. I would say the second part that's slightly more challenging is, and maybe not natural. I don't sleep very much, so I really only sleep probably 4.5 hours a night, and so I'm just I'm constantly reading new stuff, and it's just kind of an obsession for me. So there's definitely a healthy dose of obsessive compulsive disorder that I kind of leverage for myself in a positive manner, because I find that when I get fixated on something that is just interesting to me, that I know there's no middle ground. Like I just go all in on it. The other thing I would say is a willingness. Now I know this comes along with I've had a good career where I've been able to generate a respectable income for myself, and I have some money that I can invest in things. But a general willingness to buy the new toys and play with them and find the time to play with them. And I think when I think about different things that customers might want to talk to you, whether you're an agency person or a consultant, or frankly you're just part of maybe a leadership team or a manager and you've got other people looking to you for advice, there's a big difference between reading about a technology and living the technology. Because I think when you read about a technology, it's very, very easy to get up in the hype. Frankly, half the time the people that you're reading it from have probably never even used it. There's some journalist who used it for 10 minutes at CES or whatever. And that thing that I talked about earlier about the getting caught up in the hype and the high fives and the awesome factor versus the reality of trying to use something on an ongoing basis, I think is really important. And that I find has given me a more realistic view of we're saying that consumers are going to love to do this, but I can actually tell you that they're not going to use it in this way, in my opinion, over an extended period of time. And I think that only comes through using something long enough or using things in real life situations so that high five moment wears off, and you start looking at things for their real value.
Thank you so much for all this information, and let's talk about your current companies. We started the conversation a few weeks ago, and it's fascinating, and since then I've been sharing. So 2 companies, Chameleon Collective and Code Orange, how they relate to one another, how do they come about?
So Chameleon Collective was the ultimate uncompany for me. It was I swore about 1.5 years ago that I would never start another business again, because I really wanted to focus on having freedom and personal freedom and a certain lifestyle that I wanted to live. And since then, I've not only failed at not starting another business, but I've spectacularly failed at not starting 2 businesses. And frankly, I'm running a 3rd business for my brothers, but that's another story. And originally it started off as a company where I wanted to do independent kind of gun for hire CMO and chief revenue officer work for people. I used to describe myself, maybe still do some days, that when people kind of trying to understand my personality type, I would say, well, have you seen Pulp Fiction? And and I say, well, I'm the wolf. I was the Harvey Keitel character. I'm the cleanup guy that you want to send into the deep end. And when shit gets a little crazy, and I said, I just kind of thrive in that kind of chaos and that kind of stress. And I think that's a very valuable skill that people want, especially for private equity firms and companies like that when they want to do a turnaround. What happened though is, as I spoke to more and more people like me, people who, entrepreneur friends of mine, I would say actually probably 75% of Chameleon Collective has founded at least one company, which is pretty crazy. This is something I think we worked out. There's something like 13 or 14 former CEOs in the group. Everyone has held at least some, C-suite role. And frankly, most of us got connected in because at least one of us is friends with one of the other chameleons. And we started noticing this kind of common DNA amongst the group, and that was that many of us were doing consulting work, and there's still the Deloittes and the PwCs and whatever of the world, and even the Sapients for consulting, and they've got a great space in the market, and they do great for certain types of engagements. But we started realizing there was another type of customer out there, a customer that valued people that were very, very high impact change agents. I kind of struggle with liking that term, but people that can come in and really, really, really make an impact, and do it under very challenging situations, and not necessarily be, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to work for 3 months and I'm going to give you a PowerPoint deck, for $450,000. Someone who can come in and go, I understand where you're at right now. I know it because I understand your industry. Our focus is around media, tech, and retail, for the record. And say, I can come in because I'm already an expert at this thing. In 2 weeks, I can assess and understand where you're at. While I'm helping solve stuff on the fly and stabilizing the business, or just dealing with whatever challenging situation it is, I can develop the strategy at the same time, and I can get in there and hit the place with all the spin. God, the Pomeranians.
It's the dog you don't like.
Yeah, so I've got three Pomeranians. If a squirrel farts in Iowa, one of those dogs will hear it, and only one has to start barking, and they all go crazy. And so this was, I think, this became a very interesting proposition. The value, effectively, of entrepreneurial DNA. Mm-hmm. And then what was really interesting was, because we had this, all of us, beyond sharing this kind of certain skill set, all of us actually had aligned around this idea that we really didn't want conventional jobs anymore. We were people that were all kind of alpha personalities in their own right, and we were looking for a certain quality of life and a lifestyle that we weren't going to get working at a big Fortune 500 or even a large up and coming startup. And we wanted that freedom. And so when you have a mindset like that, you actually, and you're saying, look, I want to come in, I want to have a lot of impact, I want to help people, and then I actually want to move on. And so what we started thinking was, we have our group has a lot of value, not from just the type of work we do, but actually how big our network is. And that network might be everything from business development, but it might also be from helping people build teams. So we actually added in a recruiting division, which is doing extremely well. And so now our pitch is something like, we're going to come in, maybe it's one chameleon, maybe it's 4 chameleons, maybe it's 2 chameleons, whatever it is. We come in, we can build a very senior executive leadership team for you very quickly. We can solve some problems, and then once we're in there, we will have a much better understanding of your business, and we will actually fire ourselves. We're the only consulting firm on earth. I think I might be nuts, and maybe I'll regret this years from now, but as far as I know, we're one of the few consulting firms on earth that tries to get themselves fired every 6 months. And so we say, look, this is the person you need, the long-term solution. And maybe it's a direct replacement from you, or maybe it's 2 other people, but it's hard to really make those recommendations to really inside the business. And our goal is that when we back away, they're not addicted to us, like, let's say, an agency model or even most consulting models where you're trying to get people on 3 years worth of billables. We can go in and say, look, we left this company in a really, really great sustainable position where the CEO is happy, the investors are happy. That we left them in a spot where they're going to be successful. And frankly, I think that's why private equity firms like us so much, because we're coming in, we're solving it, and we're leaving them in a good spot. And then I'd much rather work on the next opportunity than unnecessarily drag a client out in a way that I've seen some companies do in the past, and it's just not our style. And I think people recognize that. I think it's really cool.
So I love the fact that you mentioned lifestyle and the ability to kind of connect all the dots. As you know, I started freelancing full-time as of a year ago. And so far, I just have been so happy with the progress and the people I get to work with, the projects I get to choose to work on. It's just like learning so much. So how do people... What is it?
So I was going to say that when you make a choice to go down this kind of independent route. And I feel like, look, we live in an age where, you've got all these technologies, collaborative technologies, Slack, video conferencing, all these collaborative project management tools. And you just don't need to be in the same room. In fact, I would argue that I'm finding it almost counterproductive to be in large spaces. I feel very strongly about video conferencing. I probably spend over 4 hours a day in a video call, and you get that sense that you're with them and you don't even notice. So in fact, one client recently who joined one of the companies I work with, when we finally met in person, we actually had to remind ourselves that we hadn't met in person because we've been working together and seeing each other almost every day for 3 months. I just felt like I'd known him forever. So you get that side of it. The flip to that, I think this whole journey started for me because when my wife and I were really reviewing what was important to us right before I decided to go, down this path, we realized that, frankly, the life goal that we had set for ourselves was we wanted to spend 2 months of the year, every year for the rest of our lives, 1 month each in a different location forever. And we thought, man, this is a great dream, and we can, whatever those places were. I think our current bucket list is going to take us 23 years to complete, and we've already got it written out. And I just had this moment where I said, you know what, I can do that right now, not because of money or anything like that, because it's possible. I've got a skill set that is portable, and I feel like the technology and the tools are there to do it. And this year, I'm very proud to say, or 2016, I worked out that I spent 365 days, I spent over 300 days in shorts. And that was awesome. And frankly, I had one of the best years I've ever had professionally, and I spent the vast majority of it in a pair of shorts.
For clarity purpose, is that because you're not in an office? That's why you can wear them.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the weather allows in Florida.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I live in South Florida. I always look nice, and I like to believe anyway. And I'm in a professional-looking office, and my clients are very comfortable with it. But most of the time I'm wearing a pair of shorts. I'm certainly not wearing any shoes, just like right now.
Me either. I know.
I think that's amazing. And at the same time, doing executive level work with companies doing hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases billions of dollars a year in revenue, and I don't think it's affected that in any negative way. In fact, I think they notice how focused I could be, and I frequently get the wisecracks about my 3 a.m. emails to them.
I know. I send emails sometimes, 1, 2 in the morning. I know I should go to sleep a little earlier, but it's like nobody's stopping you. I no longer feel the sense of, well, I have to get up at 7 o'clock and be sitting in the traffic like everybody else the next day.
The only proof of our dedication to a job is the outputs of what we do. So there's no, if I want to do that in the middle of the night, or I want to do that in the middle of the day, or I want to do that whatever terms, as long as I deliver and perfectly over-deliver to my clients, then everyone's really happy. And I think there's no much more of this faux validation that you get because you can sit in an office and smile at someone every day.
It's so true. And people, a year ago, since I started freelancing, I started writing, talking about it a little bit more. And I think somehow there's a benefit of being being a minority, being a woman, an Asian woman, to say, hey, if Faye could do it, I bet I can do it too. I mean, people don't tell me that precisely, but I have a feeling it's like running a podcast. If she can do it, then,
It's scary for some people. I think people are really, really afraid to make that leap. And I think part of what's allowed us to recruit so many amazing people from Chameleon Collective and Code Orange, and for the record, both companies will never have an office. We've all, there's now over 50 people between both businesses, which is incredible given that they're both, around a year old. And, we will never have an office. It's just not part of our DNA. It's not part of our culture. Some people have gotten together in certain cities and established places, but it's not, a mandate of the company, and it's something they chose to do on their own. And I'd like to, show that to clients that we don't do that, because I think also first off, you get the right people wherever they may be with the right experience. Sometimes some of these people are unhireable. Like I don't think they would have joined any organization if it wasn't on their terms like this is. I kind of look at some of my partners in Chameleon Collective and can't believe that we're even working together. And I think part of the way that we are able to do that is we actually operate on a completely flat management structure that's kind of a derivative of holacracy. And I've gotten people that maybe I wouldn't have worked for them and they wouldn't have worked for me, but in this way that we've approached the culture of the company, we've been able to get all these just incredible kind of alpha personalities under one roof. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, I think this message will resonate with a lot of listeners, because this is the route everybody is trying to pursue if they haven't done it already. I look forward to a very exciting opportunity for myself starting next Monday. Sort of already started with Seth Godin, and so I signed up for MBA, so alternative MBA.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and I just noticed this week alone, I got, other than the physical books I got in the mail, everything else is online. The student communities, homework assignments, everything's within WordPress. I thought it was going to be some fancy system, WordPress and Slack and Zoom for conferences. And
it's just using all the great tools right off the shelf and it's making it happen.
Yeah, and that's it, and you got coaches, and so I'm really eager to see how that plays out, because I think a lot of the systems and the way that they work together can really relate back to how you run your company. So people are pretty eager to ask that question: how do you recruit? And if they think themselves of being very talented, of something to offer, how could they be part of your team, for example?
That's a tricky one. So this is it's an unusual company in the sense that we've probably got about 40 or 50 people on the waiting list right now. We will not, because again, if you think about what I was saying earlier, in a traditional company, and anything I've frankly done in the past, my goal was, frankly, I was always trying to figure out how to sell it. And so because of that, I was always trying to think about how I grow it. And I'm like, grow, hire, bring in more and more and more biz dev. But then if you flip that on their head and you think about something like, Chameleon Collective, where we're saying, no, this is about happiness ultimately, and doing great work. We're not rushing to pull in partners or anything like that if we don't need to. And basically, anyone who's in Chameleon Collective, someone in the group has to have worked with them before. So you have to have at least one person that can vouch for you. And then a certain number of partners have to basically buy into you. There's no way to apply. So it's invite only, basically. So, but what we're finding is that every time we add one partner, there's 3 more people that are like, oh my God, this is great. I've got to bring in, my friend Susan or whatever it may be. And so we've actually had to slow down the recruiting process just a little bit. So, if anyone's out there and they think they have this kind of comparable skill set and they visit ChameleonCollective.com or codeorange.com and, they're kind of excited about it, of course they can reach out to me, but the best thing you can do is check your LinkedIn and see who you know there. And we feel that if the company is not driven by if our main driving factor isn't how can we raise our revenue this year by 20%, which for the records, it's happening naturally, but that's not our goal. Our goal is about how do we keep doing amazing work and how do we all continue to enjoy this lifestyle. Then we recruit by very different standards from other people, and it's kind of awesome. It's actually it's the happiest I've been in a long time because the culture is so right.
Before we close, I know that I'm a few minutes over already. Is kind of coming full circle into the things I remember you the most from 7 years ago in 2009 is you're in a meeting, you're very collaborative, you're a team player, and that's when I found out who you are and all that. And then people said, without naming them, it's clear who they are in that meeting, is Freddie is a really, really nice guy, really down to earth. So I thought to myself, because many people working at Sapient Consulting tend to come from relatively privileged families, what are some of the values that you learned, growing up? Maybe it's your mom, dad, brother and sister. What are some of the values distilled in you? Yeah,
I'm lucky I got 2 great parents. I got a great mom who actually invited to come live with me this year. Was an entrepreneur as well. But I think from a business standpoint, my father probably had the biggest impact on me. For those of you listeners and watchers, I should say that, don't know my family background, but, my father was a guy called Sir Freddie Laker, and he was knighted by the Queen, and he was considered considered the early pioneer of low-cost air travel. So if you have been on a low-cost flight with a Southwest or EasyJet or whatever, Dad started the airline that basically broke government regulation of aviation. And in fact, if you look at, anything about Richard Branson even says that, my father was his business idol. In fact, one of the earliest Virgin planes was named after Dad. And this had a huge impact on me, not only in terms of, frankly, being a lot of pressure. Frankly, it was a big shadow to live in. I spent most of my childhood, even though, going full circle back to the story I was telling at the beginning, being cut off. But the reality is I spent my whole childhood being groomed to be an airline CEO. He was grooming me to be an airline CEO from the time I was 13 or probably younger. But it wasn't all that work that actually I think I learned from him, and I think the most important lesson I got from him, and he gave me whether I wanted or not when he cut me off, which is about humility. There's a big difference between confidence, and you can be confident, don't get arrogant, and remember that you can make any mistake on earth, no matter how successful you've been, and you might be doomed to repeat them again. And I think that can cause you to have a healthy dose of humility. And I think when people that don't have humility, I don't think are capable of being collaborative, because you're not willing to accept that great ideas can come from anywhere. You can say that, you can say it out loud like you mean it, but you're not really listening if you don't really think that you can have that kind of humility. And I think it doesn't allow you to be wrong. People that don't have humility can't accept being wrong, and I think being accepting when you're wrong is super important. And I also feel like, and I've seen this happen to a lot of people, not just people who grew up in privileged families, but frankly people who have become very successful, which I have been exposed to a lot. And you start to think you're better than other people. And actually, when you do that, you stop connecting with people, because you think you are only connecting with people on your own level, or you're looking at people through a certain lens, and it's frankly not a good look. I don't like people like that, and I see it a lot. And so, I just always try and encourage people to have some humility. And I can tell you. Maybe a great way to end this would be to tell you my favorite story my father ever told me. And so my dad and I were best friends, and we used to talk about only two things. And not everyone understood our relationship, but this is all we talked about. We talked about business, and we talked about women. That was all we talked about.
Great choice.
And he was 84 when he died. He'd be over 94 now, so there's a huge age gap between us. I think he was 55 or something when I was born. And but we talked about these two things, and we loved talking about those two things. And I used to call him every day. And even when I started my first business, I was calling him every single day, and we talked at least 20, 30 minutes a day. And we never hung up the phone without saying, I love you, for the record. And we were really, really tight. And one day I was with him, and I was telling him something stupid I had done. And I think in this particular case, it involved a woman. And I remember he's listening to me and nodding. He listens, he nods. I talk for 2, 3, 4 minutes, who knows what. He doesn't say a word and waits me to finish, tell my story. And as soon as I finish, he just kind of nods. He puts his hand on my shoulder and goes, "Son, I fucked up things you haven't even thought of yet." and it was funny and it was profound all at the same time. It made me laugh, but at the same time, it also made me kind of go this guy's got 50 plus years on me, and everything that I ever think I'm going to screw up, this guy's screwed up 3 times already, and I'm probably going to screw up at least twice more as well. And it was just, and he did okay, and it made me kind of just go that it's just part of life. And I think, having the humility about
the ups and downs of that journey is okay. And frankly, if you're really lucky, try and have a good sense of humor about it.
Yeah, make mistakes. And I was really touched by, because of you, I learned so much more about your dad. And I know being knighted is no easy task. And, people in the States might not even be able to relate to that. But one thing that really touched me was, in the end, how the people of England really supported. And I mean, I saw some of the people, I can just imagine people pulling $20, $100, whatever they can afford to support him. I mean, that said everything.
You remember the band, The Police? They even put a benefit concert together to raise money for him. Sting's old band.
Yeah.
So I mean, the people, he was a folk hero there. Because I think people today, it's easy not to remember this, but like before deregulation of the aviation industry and low cost carriers, if you were a plumber or a waitress, like you couldn't afford to fly from England to America. Like it just didn't happen. And so it was really for the middle and upper class, and so to a lot of people in England, like it was like he was a man of the people. In fact, I've met countless people over the years where they're like, I was a student, and the first time I ever went to America was on a Laker flight. They tend to be people in their kind of like late 40s or 50s, and changed my life. And so when they shut Laker Airways down, and all those airlines conspired against him. And then the day he shut down, the prices were doubled, and then a week later they were quadrupled. It was pretty obvious, that the people that were really going to suffer, frankly, was the everyday man, and those everyday men, rallied for him. It was cool.
Yeah, it was really touching. Those are the stories that you just never forget. And I have to say, very few businessmen ever had this happen to them. So.
And you want to talk about a lesson in humility. I think all the stuff he went through, I think, really helped him to be that.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for your time. And this is just precious. I always get so excited. I get this such a natural high just talking to people.
That's fun. I enjoyed it. It was good stories today. Thanks for making me think about some of them. I'll see you later, Freddie.
All right.
Cheers.
Take care, Freddie. Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Feisworld podcast. My team and I will be thrilled if you choose to write us a review on iTunes. It really helps to get the word out. Simply search for Feisworld Podcast in your iTunes app under Podcast. Click on Readings and Reviews tab, and then write a review. The star review takes seconds, or a brief text review will be fantastic too. Thank you on behalf of me and my team from Feisworld.